Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to be here today. Before I begin my presentation, I would just like to ask everyone in this room who's either served in the military in the past or continues to serve today to please stand for a second. I want to thank you very much for your service to our country, the sacrifices you made, both you and your family. I don't know if you noticed, but I'm the chairman of the audit committee for the Department of Defense. And one of the things I do in any presentation I make, I try to let people know the definition I heard of military members, and it always stuck with me for my whole life, and I want to share that with you. That when you look at a military member or someone who served in the military, think about this for a second. That for all of them, at one point in their life, they made out a blank check to the United States of America for an amount up to and including their life. And so for that, I'm very grateful for what you do. So thank you very much for your service. I don't stand in one place, so I'm going to start out moving around and might end up back in here. And part of that is from being the Auditor General for 15 years, I didn't want to give anyone a clear shot at me, so I figured I should move around. But I want to start the way I always do. No matter where I get introduced and when I do a presentation, I always start out by speaking about my business card. And this is my business card. It's the same like all of yours. It has my name and my title on the front. But the most important part is what's on the back, and that's my core values. And they're integrity, reliability, independence, and accountability. And you can hold your finger over the bottom three. The top one, integrity, is the most important, because without integrity, then the words that come out of my mouth and the words in my report would be absolutely useless. So my whole career, when I hand out my business card, I never hand it like this with my name on top. I always hand it like this with my core values on top. And I tell them it's a contract between myself and all of you, that I will give you integrity, reliability, independence, and accountability. You can call me on it anytime you want. My number's on the other side. I've done that my whole career, and even at the Auditor General's office, the whole career there. And I told all the employees there, I won't be here for the rest of your life. I know I won't, because I don't stay in one place for a long period of time. I said, I know I won't be here, but I want to help you to be a success. And my promise to you is this: if every single day, before you make a decision, if you reflect upon your core values, and you say to yourself, before I perform this action, is this in alignment with my core values? Then go forward and do it. But it's in violation of your core values, stop and ask yourself, why am I about to do something that's against everything I stand for? If you do that, if everyone did that, there'd be less people standing up in front of their families and the public apologizing for what they did. So I told them that, and hopefully they'll carry on throughout their career. What I'm going to do today is I'm going to talk to you about a lot of things in a short amount of time. I wish I had 8 hours to tell you about all the problems and all the solutions. I speak all around the world on financial problems in the government sector, but I try to tell people, think about F. Scott Fitzgerald. And what he said was, grab your chair, pull it up to the edge of the precipice, because I'm about to tell you a story. And that's what I'm going to do this morning. I'm going to kind of weave this story between international financial problems, federal problems, state problems, all the way down to local problems. We're going to cover the pensions. And because of this week, we obviously will talk a little bit about Central Falls. So we start off. I'm going to tell you a bunch of numbers, and if you don't remember them all, the concept you want to walk away with this, the numbers were all big and they were all bad. If you keep that in mind, it'll all fit into place, and I'm about to tell you. But I promise you, as depressing as it starts, to me, true leadership is you have to clarify the situation, which I will do for you today, and then you always have to provide hope. Because we need hope to solve the problem. And actually, in Rhode Island, it's very appropriate because it's our motto. But you need hope to solve these problems. So let's really talk about the international piece first, because you can't look at this in a vacuum about our problems. Internationally, when I talk about international problems, I use the acronym PIGS, P-I-G-S. P being Portugal, I, you can pick your I. It's either Ireland, Italy, or Iceland. G is Greece, S is Spain. all the problems that they're having financially, you see it rippling across the world. It isn't just a problem in the United States. This is a worldwide problem, having financial problems. So there's several waves that are going to affect our state, you as an individual, all these waves, and it starts at the international level. You know, my presentations, as I've been doing this for years and doing my research on this, look at France as an example. France having severe financial problems, try to raise the retirement age for their Social Security system by 2 years. So you'd have to work 2 years longer in order to collect their form of Social Security. People rioting in the streets, protesting, all upset about it. It's not an easy thing to do. Look at Italy. My family came from Italy. I go back to Italy, I go to visit my family. They have a protest in the street. All the young people protesting because of austerity programs, the price of tuition at college and universities went up. What do? They have Stop Everything Day. Block all governmental buildings, you couldn't get in. Block streets, you couldn't get in. Stop Everything Day. So what I'm telling you is it's difficult to solve a problem. You're going to have complex problems, require complex solutions, and not everyone's going to be happy when you come up with these solutions. Then as an aside, you look at Bolivia. Bolivia wants to reduce the retirement age. So you can collect their form of Social Security at an earlier age. When asked how they're going to pay for it, they just shrug their shoulders. I mean, they really should look at the example of the United States and how things don't work if you do it that way, but they go in the opposite direction. They'll see in the future what a mistake that really is. And then let's look at the federal area. You just find out yesterday, and it's a question whether it's going to happen, but you have S&P supposedly dropped the rating for the federal government from AAA to AA+. I don't know if you all heard, but like within about 2 hours, you hear about the Treasury telling S&P that they made a mistake, and supposedly S&P is going to pull it back and go back to a AAA. Supposedly. I'm only saying what I've heard, not factual. But you look at this and you say, well, first of all, how could the rating agencies make this big a mistake if they did actually make it? It's the first time in United States history you ever had the United States government drop in a rating. So if you didn't triple check that 100 times before you went out and dropped this rating. I think everybody loses credibility for doing something like that. But from a personal perspective, I've been thinking about this for several years. I think all of them should have dropped the ratings years ago. The federal government has severe financial problems. I serve on the board Come Back America initiative with David Walker, the former Comptroller General of the United States. And I just want to go over a few numbers because I can do a whole hour just on the federal government piece. But just want to let you know some of the things we're talking about at Come Back America initiative with David Walker. And keep in mind what I told you about that acronym PIGS. Portugal, Iceland, Italy, Ireland, Greece, and Spain. Keep those countries in mind for a second. We did an index at the Come Back America initiative. It's called the Sovereign Fiscal Responsibility Index. It takes all the countries in the world and tries to separate them and prioritize them on the ability to get through financial problems. So number one actually is good, and the lower numbers is bad, so keep that in mind. So at the top you have Australia, number one in the world, ability to handle their finances. Number 10, Brazil. Now, Brazil, a lot of people think have severe financial problems, but they're ranked number 10 in the world. 12, India. 17, Korea. Some of these countries you may feel like, well, why would they be so high? 18, Mexico. 24, Spain, part of the PIGS, the acronym I told you. 28, the United States of America. Imagine Spain before us, Mexico before us, Brazil before us, India. 30, Ireland. 32, Iceland. 33, Portugal. 34, Greece. That's not the kind of company we want to keep the United States in with Greece, Ireland, Iceland, Portugal, and Spain. But that's where we are. Why are we in a condition like that in the federal government? Well, let me just tell you. Their financial statements go to September. They have a September 30th year end. So as of September 30th of 2010, they had assets of $2.8 trillion. It's a lot of money. Go back to college days, that's 12 zeros, in case you forgot. Trillion, that's 12 zeros. When I first got on the Department of Defense, when I became the chairman of the audit committee for the DOD, when they saw that budget was in the trillions, I just wanted to count to make sure it had 12 zeros, because I only saw it in school. I never saw it in real life. So I was there to count. Yes, it does have 12 zeros in it. So you look at the federal government total financial statement. You look at their balance sheet, September 30th, 2010. $2.8 trillion in assets. Seems like a lot, and it is a lot. Their liabilities, $61.6 trillion. 61.6. Yet we're still rated AAA. 2.8 trillion in assets, 61.6 trillion in liabilities. Severe problem. Divided by every single person in the world, just to kind of put things in perspective, because you look at 61 trillion, now how do I deal with it? The numbers are too big, you throw your arms up in the air. Per person, $199,400 per person in the United States. Your share of the federal government debt, every single one of you. And I don't know about you, but how many of you are putting that on your personal financial statements when you apply for a loan? Do you tell the bank, oh, I also owe $199,000 to the federal government? I don't think you're doing that. Neither am I. They'll come back to that again when I talk about the state of Rhode Island, too. So I only have a limited amount of time, so I don't want to spend too much time on it, but I sort of want to lay it out for you because you have to keep in mind that we as citizens, there's a lot of problems that are coming our way. And if you think about the federal government problems, they're going to need to solve this problem. And how are they going to solve it? Are they going to solve it by raising taxes? Well, that's less money in all of your pockets. Are they going to solve it by cutting money to states and local governments? Well, that's putting more pressure on the states and the local governments. Are they going to solve it by reducing services? Well, that's going to impact everyone in our community. Where are they going to pay for these services? Is it coming out of my pocket? So the standard of living could actually drop by doing this. So keep in mind, water flows downhill. If the federal government addresses a problem, and they have to address this problem, serious problem, have to address it. It's going to be less the states and local governments. So I told you, keep in mind, the beginning is going to be quite depressing when I tell you, and then I'll provide hope in the end. We'll get there. Now we get to the state side. Look at what's happening at the states. You go across the country, you have many states with deficits going on. Look at Rhode Island projected going into the future. Deficits for the next few years. Severe deficits for our state as we move forward. So severe financial problems. Bring it down to the city and town level, because I want to spend a little bit more time in that area, because that's what I get asked to focus on. When you're looking at city and town problems, you're looking at pension problems, unfunded pension problems, you're looking at OPEB, other post-retirement benefits, things like health care for life. When we talk about pensions, we talk about underfunded. When we talk about OPEB, that health care for life, I refer to those as unfunded. You might have a few communities that have set a little bit of money aside, but it's so small, it's immaterial to me. So I focus on OPEB, that health care for life, as being unfunded. And then you have just general fiscal stress in cities and towns. High expenses, revenue is restricted. In the end, in case I don't come back to this point, what I try to tell everyone is, keep in mind these waves as they come. Federal government potentially sending less money. States showing deficits, less money to cities and towns. In the city and town, you have unfunded pensions, you have the OPEB, healthcare, and you have general fiscal stress. All of these things. You think about a sophisticated person that's going out to buy a home in the future. We always heard about, and I heard my whole life, I'm going to look at this community, I want to buy a home. The number one thing is that they have a good school system. I think now, the more sophisticated person is going to say, do they have a good school system? And what about the unfunded pension plan? What about the underfunded pension plan? What about the unfunded post-retirement benefits? What about recurring deficits? Because I know what that means. That means they're going to raise my taxes. So I want to know that before I move to a community. So I think the more sophisticated persons, because I'm looking for a community that got their fiscal house in order, and it's that important. And when I'm all done with my presentation, I'm always going to focus on your role as citizens, because we have a role in this. If we don't take care of this problem, we're going to have a severe problem in the future. And as I told many people and many times when I testified, if we don't solve this problem, we just keep pushing it, then I say to everyone, let's stop sending our children and grandchildren birthday cards and Christmas cards. Let's just send them invoices. Let's be honest with them. They owe money because we enjoyed services and we didn't pay for it. Let's just send them an invoice. Your federal government, send them an invoice today for $199,000. You owe it because I enjoyed getting all the services I had, but you owe the money. And I'm going to tell you, on the state level and the city and town level, if you took the unfunded liability for the state retirement system, which now is about $9 billion, billion with a B, and you added in the unfunded liability for the cities and towns, it's about $1.9 billion. Let's call it $2 billion. And if you looked at the post-retirement benefits for the cities and towns that are not funded, that's another $3.3 billion. You look at the state's unfunded liability for post-retirement benefits, it's about $800 million. You add that all together, it is approximately $15 billion. If you divided that by every single person in the state of Rhode Island, from the newborn baby that was just born this morning, to the most elderly person, it's about 1 million people, it comes out to be about $15,000 per person in the state of Rhode Island. You know, just in my family alone, there's my wife and I have 5 sons. If you take that 15 grand and you multiply it times 7 people, and I owe over $100,000. I go back to the same thing I told you before. I said, if I'm preparing a financial statement for a bank, I'm not putting Iowa, state of Rhode Island, $100,000. And as I've mentioned once before, when I talk about these numbers, but I did get misquoted in the newspaper because it said that the former Auditor General's advice was just get in your car and leave. Well, my actual comment that I said, which I'm going to say to you today, is I said, what could happen is if you think about this, the people that graduate, the students that graduate from college and universities could just get in their car and leave. They wouldn't owe this debt. And that is not what we want to happen in our state. They'll lose the best and the brightest. I have 5 sons, I told you. My 3 older ones that graduated from college, one went to New York to get a job. One went to Boston, one went to Greensboro, North Carolina. I'd love to have them stay in Rhode Island. I love this state. And as many people that know me close know, I've been offered jobs to go in many other states. I've turned down jobs because they wanted me to move. And I tell everyone when I'm in negotiations, it's a deal breaker. You think I'm leaving Rhode Island, it's a deal breaker for me. I can work from my home, I'll get on a plane, I'll fly anywhere. But I want to live here. This is a beautiful place to live. But we have to straighten out this financial mess. And it is a mess. You know, I went back and looked at the founding fathers and what their core values were. Their core values were prudence, thrift, limited debt, savings, and stewardship. When I look at this, we need to go back to those core values, and if we do that, we can be on our pathway to success. That's what we need to do here. And, you know, we can talk about all the fiscal stress. We can talk about unfunded pensions, unfunded OPEB. We can talk about the federal government deficits and structural deficits. We can talk about that all day. But if we don't fix those problems, the biggest problem we have is a leadership deficit. Mm-hmm. If we don't fix it, that's what we have. We have an opportunity that they can write the history books later on that we as a state, cities and towns, and we as a country fix these financial problems. And you can't fix it just by taxing people. We got to go through. When I was the Auditor General, believe me, I should tell them, you can't just blame it on the unions and the wages and all this other stuff. There are several lines in the budget. It's not 2 lines. It's not one line that says revenue and one that says wages. There's a whole bunch of lines in there. You know, maybe there are services that we as citizens have just expected for years that we really don't even need anymore. And maybe there are services that people in business today can do it faster, better, cheaper than a government can do it. We should start looking at every single line and look at different things. Do I actually need these services? Is this a need or is this a want? And make those same decisions we need to make from a personal level to go through each one. And maybe we can do it. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about the pensions in a second. But I'll stick to this for a second now. Because I want to give you some facts. I serve on that advisory committee for the pensions, but I want to make sure I make it clear to all of you so you can have some facts in here. The first one is, and it's really a stunning fact, you take that whole liability, the $9 billion, think about this for a second. 67% of that liability relates to retirees and inactive people. Inactive people are people that are retired, invested in a plan, but could receive a pension at a particular point in time in the future. So imagine Of the $9 billion, 67% relates to retirees and inactive. So if you can't touch retirees and you can't touch the inactives, how are you going to come up with that kind of money? That's a lot of money that's sitting in there. So obviously the rest, 33%, relates to current workers. When we talk to the actuaries, they said they consider this to be extremely rare that you'd have 67% related to retirees and inactive. So we might be number one in another bad area, but it's very rare. One thing that's bad, if you listen on Social Security, they talk about we're down to just about 2 people working for every one that's collecting Social Security. In our retirement system here in Rhode Island, there is 1 employee working for every 1 retiree. Another bad situation out there. 1 working for every 1 that is retired. So if we do nothing, absolutely, if we do nothing, we just leave everything the way it is, next year's budget, you need an extra $300 million just to pay for the pension benefits. A staggering amount of money. It's only 48% funded. Imagine, 48% funded. If you were in business and you fell below 80%, the federal government steps in and puts all additional requirements on you. But in government, the way it generally works, we pass laws to exempt government from these things. And that flexibility, in this case, hurt severely because we're at 48% funded. That's a fact. I want to talk to you a little bit. I'll get back to, let me stick to, I keep wanting to move off this one, but there's like so much. So I want to talk about Central Falls. I'll get there. But I go back to when I was the Auditor General. We issued a report. I encourage you, go to the Auditor General's website. I'm not the Auditor General anymore. Dennis Hoyle is doing a great job there. Go to the website and take a look at it. We produced a report, now it's probably about 7 years ago, talking about the pensions. And Dennis released another one last year, and a new one's going to be coming out this year. So all those numbers that I gave you, the $3.3 billion unfunded OPEB, the $1.9 billion unfunded pension, that's as of a year ago. I guarantee you the numbers are worse today than they were then. It didn't go in the right direction. Everything went in a terrible direction. So the numbers will be even higher, even worse than when I talked to you about that. $15,000 per person. I venture to tell you that when that report comes out, it's going to be higher than $15,000. Well, think about all of this. We did it at the Auditor General's office. We continue to do it. I always believed in that role, that our job was to put light on the subject. Light would create heat, and heat would cause action. That report, when picked up by the media and everyone looking at it, will say, oh my God, we have a serious problem and we need to solve it. You know, now, I got to tell you, we go back to a few years ago, I really get tired of a lot. This is my personal perspective. I get real tired of how many times I heard in my 15-year career and how many times I do presentations, people blame the legislature. I don't blame the legislature. In 15 years as the Auditor General, I never once saw the legislature or the leadership sit in the city and town and negotiate the contracts. Those contracts were negotiated in the town by the mayor and the council approving those things. That's where it's done. It was not done at the legislature. That's where it's done. And when I had meetings, I remind people of that all the time. Stop blaming them. You negotiated the contract. You signed the contract, not them. But unfortunately, where we stand today, we need the legislature to step in and solve the problem. And it has to be solved now. And when you look at it, when you go back a few years, the legislature did have a committee and did address the pension and did make changes. It isn't that they did nothing. They made changes. But I can tell you today, the numbers are worse than they were before. We need even more drastic steps now. And it's going to come back to all of you and our role as citizens. There's a basic civics class. I was an accounting major, political science minor. So to me, I live in all this world, and I do a lot of research in it, and I actually, that line between work and play is really blurred for me. I just love this stuff and how to solve problems in it. But when you go back to it, for all of us as citizens, when the recommendations come out, whatever they may be, they won't be good. They won't be liked by many people. As a matter of fact, if you think about it, when the Bruins won the championship, if you remember, they won in Canada. The next day, they flipped over cars and they burned things, threw rocks through windows. That was just for a championship for hockey. Imagine touching someone's pensions. People are not going to like what their recommendations are. And all I'm asking all of you, because I really don't know you all, but all I'm asking all of you is, when they flip my car over, please come to my home and flip it back so I can go to work. That's all I want to do. I don't care if it's dented. I just want to be able to drive to work. And when I was the Auditor General, we used to issue reports, my wife used to read the paper and say, oh, another town we can't move to, another town we can't move to. So now I'm going to have to take one of these job offers to move out of Rhode Island, I guess, when I'm done. I actually, as a quick aside, I walk down the streets and a lot of people that are either police officers, firefighters, and people that work for the government will pull over when they see me. And like, Ernie, whatever the recommendations, I retired July 15th, make them effective after that date. Then the next person is, I retire August 12th, make it effective after that date. Well, you know, if you made it effective after everyone's date, we'll never solve this problem anyway. So if you see the forced title sign on my home, it's because I'm about to tell you now about the possible solutions. Let's talk about some of these solutions, how to solve the problem. And as a backdrop before I tell you about solving the problem, keep in mind what I told you. The pension plan is 48% funded. In business, it has to be at least 80% funded. I'd be the first one to tell you, I truly believe that in my professional point of view, it should never be 100% funded. Because if it's 100% funded, then I think you'll just have the unions come back and ask for more benefits because it's funded up to the max. And if investments go up and the dollar amount goes up, you can't take the money out of the pension fund once it's in there. So there's a lot of reasons why you don't want to do it. And keep in mind, they're based on assumptions. This isn't based on absolute fact you need $9 billion. So some of those assumptions could be wrong. So you don't want to put too much in it. But my recommendation would be at least hit the 80% mark. And let's leave the rest some flexibility. Maybe go to 85, whatever the numbers, we can work on it. So keep that in mind. So you don't have your expectations say the recommendations come out and we're going to have no unfunded liability. It's unrealistic. The other thing I want you to keep in mind, the high-level view, because I like to give people perspective on this, is keep in mind that you can't just blame it all on the people receiving pensions. It's to me, and not a lot of people are saying this, but I got to tell you, I'm not in the union. I wasn't in the union. I was the Auditor General. I was in my own business before that. But if we don't take some responsibility as a government for the actions that were taken in retirement, then we'll have blinders on when we're making decisions. Because there were many cities and towns that did not put the annual required contribution into the pension and spent it to do something else. Because I tell everyone that you have a real good financial decision, a real good political decision, the two butt heads all the time. And if you listen to me today, and you agreed with everything I said, all these recommendations, and you say, well, the federal government gives state around $3 billion per year, but the federal government's in trouble. So myself and you, we're going to run for the United States Senate. So I said, federal government, just give us $2 billion, because I don't want to put a strain on the federal government, and you keep the other billion and reduce the debt. But the person running against me says, no, we're going to take the $3 billion. And you know what? I know all of you in Newport, you want a new soccer field. I'll build that soccer field. In Burrillville, I know you want a new school. I'll give you the money for the new school. Well, who do you think is going to get elected? If the person that's going to get elected is to be the one that makes all the promises, so they give you the money. Because we as citizens, we say we want progress, but we don't want change. So we have to keep in mind, I hope you all do, reflect inside yourself about what you're asking of your government. You know, could we do with less? And believe me, 15 years as the Auditor General, I'm not a believer in raising taxes. Ask anybody who sat in those meetings with me. There's plenty of room to cut things, and I can say you can do it. But we have to also be accepting to reduce our services too, things we expect from our government. And maybe something that was provided 10 years ago and we're still providing it now, we actually don't even need it. So why was